Hello everyone, my name is ST and welcome to my second installment of WIS or WIF, also known as Why Succeed or Why to Fail, where I take a game of some renown and find out why it did so well or so poorly, when it had everything going for it or not. But first, I must ask an important question. What makes a game a failure? There could be many different answers to this question, but I believe it comes down to a couple of reasons. First, do people like playing it? And how do people remember it now? These 2 points constitute the most important aspects of what makes a good game, for even if one of these 2 aspects fail, the entire game ultimately fails with it. Today's topic might ruffle some feathers, but that won't deter me. I will begin with today's game, Diablo 3. Now I can already feel some burning eyes on me, but I have the floor. Everyone can agree with me that it's the worst in this series of games. And to be honest, it's not a horrible game that many people make it out to be, but let's start from the beginning of the franchise to get some idea what went wrong. Okay, here's where it began, with Diablo. Well, for starters, it's one of the most well-known games of all time. But I'll begin on where it started. The game developers Blizzard North were fresh off the press with their Warcraft, or Serious Orcs and Humans. Great game, by the way. That was in 1994, when they wanted something new to sink their teeth into. And drawing inspiration from the game, Tellingrod, never actually played it myself, but they first set up a turn-based RPG, but after seeing success of their newest game, Warcraft, I mentioned earlier, they changed the combat flow to real-time. The ability to play online was not implemented to lighten the production of Diablo, but it was decided that it must be. And as we know it, it was a good call. It was released on December 31st of 1996, and the masses loved it, with its expansive loot system, a 4-player cross-play LAN, I haven't said that in a while, ooh, and online play at battle.net, oh those are the good old days, selling a total of 2.5 million copies at 2001, and winning Game of the Year award in 1996. But as we know, Diablo is not just one game. It was not content to sit around, and its fan base was growing, and they were hungry for more. As a small observation, I noticed a trend of what makes a game franchise critically acclaimed is they must have a sequel that surpasses the original in every way, with examples like Halo, Mass Effect, Call of Duty, Battlefield to name a couple of modern examples. So did Diablo 2, came as to have such status. The creation of Diablo 2 was not just a copy and paste job. The team in the end used less than 1% of the original Diablo code in making its predecessor, but with more focus on online multiplayer this time around. But this took time, and the game was shown at E3 1998 and was planned for a release on 1999, but perfection takes time, and the game blessed the world on June 29, 2000, selling 1 million copies in its first 2 weeks, and as August 2001 it sold 4 million copies. Also winning many awards for its existence, such as fastest selling PC game in 2000, the best role-playing game in 2001. The PC race had its champion, but all good things must come to an end eventually. What's new becomes old. It's an inevitable truth, and so the same became of Diablo 2. On May 15th, 2012, Diablo 3 was released. But it did not begin as the way you may think. Well, in 2001, yes, it shortly began after Diablo 2 was released, so yes, it took 11 years to make. To put it bluntly, the game took a few design changes. At first it was looking like another Diablo 2, but as we can see today, that quite didn't happen that way. Well, in the beginning, the original team was put to work on the title, and all was going to plan for 4 years, But a great change happened in 2005. Vivendi, I believe I pronounced that company's name right, a massive shareholder of Blizzard North, was not happy with the current development of Diablo 3, and as a result, they pulled their funding and the studio closed. Since Vivendi held rights to it, they replaced the entire team with a new one, and began anew on Diablo 3, with a new game engine in tow. That's the short version. And we'll stick with the short version, so this video isn't 35 minutes long, so that will do. Now, let me say again that Diablo 3 is not a horrible game. We just say it doesn't live up to its predecessor, and that's pretty much how we're viewing it, but the short of this game, it tried to cater to the softcore crowd, making the game more simple and streamlined. The very thing hardcore fans hate. Now, I'll do my best to explain this, so let's start with the loot. The most important thing in Diablo, for many veterans, is we know the loot system and design vast differently from the previous installments. Where gear played a backseat to the stats of your character in the past, in Diablo 1 and 2, it is now the most important part of your character. As an example, in Diablo 2, you could take some mediocre gear to the end of the game. If you built your character just right, you'd be just fine. But in Diablo 3, you have to get the newest gear from the newest era going forward. This creates a grind that we've come to know, and some people like it. Some people don't. I'm on the latter of this, but this alone doesn't make or break the game. Another thing that bugs me is the Paragon points. This could have been a good way to show progression through the game, but you don't get access until, God knows, until level 70. I had my level 48 Paladin, and he still can get access to it. Sure, it's a good thing to have at the end game. Too bad I found the game too repetitive and stopped before I got there. And I didn't feel like power leveling through the game, because that kind of defeats the purpose if you skip half the game. Now, let's move on. I got a problem with the gold. The gold in previous games was a bit balanced, and even in this game, and at first it seemed balanced, but before long it simply became a number that I simply had too much of. The grind that you inevitably have to do gives you a lot of gold, but it's very pointless that all the gear and gold come from the same place. And the upgrade you do to the blacksmith in the shop carries over to every other hero you create. That makes the grind an entire colossal waste. Because when you go over and you have a new character and you have 300,000 gold, it's like, okay, great. This makes the grind much more fun. Anyway, another problem is the heroes. Sure, they're all look different, they all have different looking gear, but I find very little difference between them all. They all have ranged and melee attacks. They're different moves and visually. They may act a little different, but whether you're a paladin or a sorcerer, the enemy doesn't have any advantage over you in terms of range, because you have both, always. Next, I want to talk about how the characters level up. Even though there's a large selection of characters, they all pretty much, it's one road built with GPS directions, because there's no customization pretty much. Sure, you get to unlock a few abilities, but those are already pathed for you. There's no wonder about it. You simply unlock it, and that's the end of it. There's no skill points to direct, there's nothing. You can build your character from the ground up, and it'll be no different from probably the person beside you. In Diablo, that would have been a very different story. In Diablo 2 is what I mean. It just feels so dull being handed everything. Your skills, your stats, your passives. It just feels like it's defeated purpose of leveling up that almost means nothing. And Diablo 3 is just like every other MMO out there. There is no diversity. Now, you think I'll be done, but I'm going to talk about the difficulty and how bland that is. The difficulty here is almost non-existent because it's no difference. You can jack up the difficulty, but it's all just tied to the loot you get. That is all it is in the end. It's tied to the loot you get. You can't grind for the end game. Doesn't matter. Your stats don't mean jack shit. It's the loot you get that means anything. So that means you have to go to the new area, grind your way until you get that loot that actually makes you fight in that area that's viable. It just makes my head spin. Now, a problem I have with those skills that you get is that they all run on a cool-off time. That is effing boring. In the past, you had MP, you had mana, you had potions to refill that mana. You had to be smart about it. You just couldn't use your spells like constantly whipping it out, or you had to carry a bunch of mana potions. But in Diablo 3, everything runs off a cool-off timer, which is fine for physical skills, but for a magic user, it just takes half the fun out of the game. As you just spam your move, or use it somewhere specifically, then just wait for it to spam other moves till you can use that move again. It's just very, very dumbed down and boring in my eyes. In the end, I only find a difference between a mage and a barbarian is simply the range. Now, it's last, but I want to mention the auction house. I know it wasn't in the game very long, but I was there when it was there. Now, the very act of someone buying their way through the game to get the gear and rolling with the best, that still boils my blood a little bit, but that's simply people's choice. However, with it all stands at how people can make money from this is alright until it's abused. It just all seemed like such a cash grab. Well, they shortly ripped it out, but I remember it to this day. Now, let's cover the biggest problem, in my opinion. It is always the online feature. Now, again, we're all a little used to this, but I still don't like it. Why do I need to be online if I want to play offline? Why do I need to be online? There's no good answer for this. There's no good answer for us. It's a hindrance. And especially in day one, when you couldn't even get into the game because the servers were down. All because of this idea on launch day, the game was unplayable for all of us because of blasted error 32. But I said enough negative things about the game. Let's hear a couple of positive things, I guess. Okay, I wailed on the game, but to lighten the load, the game did do a couple things good. The cutscenes looked great at the time. And as long as the veterans don't like the art direction, I don't particularly mind it. It looks a little generic, but it's still not horrible. And I do admit that Diablo on the consoles has increased the player base, if not for a little while, but it could have been a seed of another problem present to make a connection of friends easier. So, what happened to shift my tune for a series I once held close inside? Well, lots of stuff, which plenty I've covered already. I know the game had an impossible legacy to live up to, but that's what happens when you make a third installment for a series. A lot of games don't even pan out. In fact, all the games I mentioned earlier, the third iteration didn't do so well. It's just what we come to have expectations don't really meet what we get. It happens. But back on track, the first thing is that damn dreaded Error 37 on launch day. It was a login problem at the launch that got for me in the game on day one, and I couldn't even play it for a whole week. That's a kick in the teeth when you buy a game and you can't even play it. The problem is this could have been avoided too because of the error. Servers were overloaded. Blizzard invested more in the servers for the flagship game for a sequel at one of the best games in the last 10 years. It could have been easily avoided is what the short of it is. But as much as I rip on the launch of the game, that was only for 1 week. The real problem is when I was actually playing the game. It was, well, for lack of any better words to describe it, uninspiring. The flow felt soulless as time went on. The first chapter was a nostalgia trip. It was pretty good. But after that, the game just felt repetitive without reason, redundant. When I saw the game was, and I felt crestfallen at that and thought, I waited 10 years for this? I realized that this is a perspective problem for many people, They found the game nearly perfect and fine, and many of those who didn't play the previous Diablos, well, they thought the game, there's nothing wrong with it at all, and I don't blame them. But the problem with Diablo 3 is it tried to appeal both markets, and it did it for the new players. It certainly did. But the veterans, like myself, I just feel like we've been, for the most part, forgotten. As if we no longer mattered. Even though we carried Diablo for nearly those 10 years. Still making the series relevant. Still making it known that that was one of the best games of all time. And it still is in our hearts. And Diablo 3 kind of didn't respect that, is how a lot of us may feel. You probably feel different watching this video. Maybe you have heavy disagreements with me, but it does not change how I feel in the game. Let me say again, Diablo 3 is not a bad game. It's just for me and many others, it was just a disappointment. Blizzard dumbed down the complex stat system and to make an effort to make the game more friendly to a new audience, and I see why, but for the veterans it was a flawed diamond. When it became refined and now cloudy, thus losing its value. An attempt to broaden the demographic of its player base, I think they didn't give enough thought about the people who kept the franchise alive all those years ago. The game has improved a little bit through its updates and through the expansion Reaper of Souls, which I played to get this footage. But for me, the change came far too late, and even with this change, I am still not really grappled back in. It has not impressed me. So in short, for all the Diablo 3 failed to live up to its name, and to this day it still has yet to recover. Hopefully someday they'll make a new one, and that's a little closer to the golden days maybe. I'm ST, and I'd like to thank you for watching this video, and hope to get more videos like this out made in the future. Hope to see you in the next video, and take care out there.